All right, Jacked and Juicy crew, I hope you're well. My nose is watering like fuck because I'm after being for a little bit of a walk down here in Williamstown. But I want to just get on here and give you a couple of principles of muscle building or hypertrophy. That word hypertrophy refers to building muscle. And a couple of principles that I think are very important to know and understand, whether you're working from home currently or in a gym. And this is always something that comes up when I'm working with clients, that I think it's more important to understand and this is, I'm only going to touch on a particular point today. There's so many principles of building muscle, like time under tension, metabolic stress, all these different things that we can dive into. But there is one principle that's super important that I think needs to be practiced every single time you're in the gym. And this is what I've learned, that like the biggest difference between trying to develop strength and size in the muscle in CrossFit compared to actually doing bodybuilding style work. Right, so if you've worked with me for a while, you'll understand my programs. What I'll put together, there's always a strength movement bias at the start of the program, like bench press, back squat, RDL, strict press. Then we move into accessory work, isolation, and to really focus on the muscle group that we're trying to build. Okay, so the principle is, we want to develop more muscular recruitment, more motor neuron development of that muscle, because the more motor units that we engage in a particular muscle, the more we're going to work that particular muscle group. Therefore, the more strength, the more adaptation, the more size. So that's why I have that bias of strength, because I also want you guys to have a performance goal as well. You know, to want to get a bigger back squat or a bigger bench press. That's always a fun goal to have. But, you know, why are we in this as well? To look fucking good naked. So we want to put a bit of size on that muscle. There's so many ways we can build strength without actually touching the size of the muscle. And that's just complete neural transmission from the brain through the spine into the muscle itself. So that's why you see a lot of Olympic weightlifters who lift a fucking house, lift over 200 kilos, and they're fucking little pixie people. Quads now the size of houses, but you know, that's the muscle group that's constantly getting used and developed. But you see that a lot. People that are savagely strong and small. So that's just a way of training. But in what we're doing here, jacked and fucking juicy, we're trying to build muscle. Couple of good reasons to build muscle. It looks good naked, simple as. But also, the more muscle you have on your body, the more calories, you become a calorie burning machine. So that's important to remember. Anyway, I've shouted on so long. So now let's get into what I'm talking about. Okay, what you need to be able to do when you're doing more isolated movements, it's very tricky to do this in a bigger compound movement, but doing this in the more isolated, like for example, if you're doing a barbell bench press, I would consider that quite a big compound movement. It's hard to isolate the chest. When you're doing a bench, you're activating the pecs, the shoulders, the triceps, the bicep, and the lats, the neck, even the abs. There's a lot of muscles being recruited in order to do that barbell bench press. Now, take for example another movement that will activate the pec and isolate the pec a bit more. Pectoral flies. Pec flies. You know, isolating the pec and making it work. Now, this is where we make our money. This is where we put the majority of the work that we're trying to do on a muscle group into an individual muscle, rather than a large amount of muscle groups, or a large amount of muscles in a group. So rather than working the pecs, the shoulders, the tricep, the back and everything, when we do a pec fly, we're really isolating the chest. Now, the important element here is, can you feel that? Can you feel yourself isolating that muscle and creating a contraction in that muscle? Now, here's a very simple task for you to do, and you can do it right now if you're watching this video. Where you're sitting or standing, Can you isolate and isolate and contract your calf muscle? Okay, I'm doing it now myself. But can you do that without activating your quads or your hamstrings and make your calf muscle get tight? Okay. Now let's move up the body. Your latissimus dorsi, your back muscles. Are you able to create tension in that lat muscle, and almost to the point that you feel it cramp? Even if you need to warp your body a little bit in order to create that contraction, can you do it? But can you do it without activating your chest or your shoulder or your bicep? That's the trick to it. Now, let's take it to the arm itself. Can you activate your bicep without over-activating your tricep? And again, getting it to the point of where you feel it almost cramping, almost to the point where it's uncomfortable. When you can do that, when you're able to do that, you're able to recruit a lot more motor neurons, that mind-muscle connection than most people. And that somewhat tells me that you've been training for quite a while. You understand that mind-muscle connection. But if you can't, that's something that you need to work on in every session. And that's something for everyone that can get so much better over time. If you want to start building more size on a certain muscle, you need to be able to isolate it and activate it on its own. That's why bodybuilders, that's why they do shows. When they do shows and they're on stage, they're able to isolate and activate different muscle groups as they're facing the judges. And that's what it's all about. It's being able to, create that look, create that super size. But then we transfer that over to the movement that we're doing, the isolated exercise that we're at. As I said, it'd be very hard just to isolate the pecs on their own and do a heavy bench press. That's why we drop the weight down, we work with a lighter load, and you're going to get more bang for your buck when you get more muscular connection or muscular contraction over moving a heavier weight, if that makes sense. So that's why you don't need as much heavy stuff at home as you think if you're training for hypertrophy. What you need to be able to do is put a lot of contraction into a certain muscle group, hold it there, time under tension, and then release it. Now, you can do that with your own body weight. You can do that with bands. You can do that with minimal weight. In a gym, it makes it super easy because you have all sorts of machines. You can work one-handed. You can use isolated machines all over the shop because that's what gyms have. But please understand that that's a very important principle when it comes to building muscle. Big compound movements are fantastic, and that's why in CrossFit they're used a lot. But when it comes to building muscle, over time, you need to isolate the muscle. But more than isolate it, you need to be able to create that activation, create that tension in that particular muscle to create and stimulate hypertrophy. All right? So yeah, as I said, whether you're training at home or in a gym, keep that principle in mind. It's not always about the weight that you're lifting. It's about what you're feeling in the muscle. The more you're able to contract the muscle, the more you're able to feel it when you're moving it, and even where you're sitting. That tells me the more experience you have with, one, strength training and building muscle, and two, if you're not feeling it as much, that's okay. We all got to start somewhere, but keep it in mind. The more you feel a muscle, the more it's going to build. Okay, that was a long live. But anyway, I hope that helps. And see you all very shortly. Giddy up.